There is a reason you spent so much of your life explaining, justifying, clarifying, and defending your every move. It wasn't pride. It wasn't ego. It wasn't even a desire to be right. It was survival. Long before you learned to speak your truth, you learned to protect your belonging. You learned that acceptance often depended on how well you shaped yourself into what others expected. The instinct to defend yourself began long before you could understand it. As a child, you absorbed the emotional atmosphere around you. You learned which tones meant approval and which meant danger. You learned which behaviors brought closeness and which created distance. You learned to read micro-expressions, adjust your personality, and adapt to maintain an emotional connection. You weren't defending your ideas back then. You were defending your right to be loved. And this early training followed you into adulthood disguised as over-explaining, apologizing, and shrinking. The need to defend yourself often emerges in environments where you felt unseen or misunderstood. When you grow up without consistent emotional safety, you internalize the belief that you must constantly prove your intentions to avoid being misjudged. You become hyper-aware of how others perceive you. You start building arguments in your mind before conflicts even arise. You try to preempt reactions by making yourself digestible. Your identity becomes a negotiation rather than an expression. This pattern deepens when you encounter people who project their insecurities onto you. Instead of recognizing their projection, you assume responsibility for it. You think their misunderstanding is your failure. You think their discomfort is your fault. You think their perception is your burden to fix. So you work harder to explain yourself, not realizing that some people are committed to misunderstanding you because it protects the story they need to believe. The truth is that many individuals interpret the world through the lens of their wounds. If someone is threatened by honesty, they will call you harsh. If someone is threatened by boundaries, they will call you selfish. If someone is threatened by independence, they will call you distant. In these dynamics, defending yourself becomes a full-time job because you are attempting to correct a lens you did not distort. You are fighting a battle inside someone else's mind. The deeper you go into self-awareness, the more clearly you see that your desire to defend yourself was never about truth. It was about fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of being seen as unworthy. These fears shaped your identity and trained you to respond to every perception as if your survival depended on it. But now, with growing consciousness, you begin to recognize that these reactions were not authenticity. They were adaptations. They were survival strategies from a time when you didn't have the clarity, boundaries, or inner grounding you have today. And once you see this truth, something remarkable happens. The urgency to defend yourself weakens, because the root of defense isn't the need to be right. It's the fear of being unseen. And when you finally begin to see yourself with clarity, that fear slowly begins to dissolve. There comes a moment in your self-discovery when you realize that the person you defended for years was not your true self, but the version you constructed to be accepted. This realization arrives with both clarity and grief. You begin to see how many parts of you were shaped, not by authenticity, but by survival. You crafted a self that could be tolerated, understood, praised, or approved. A self that was easier for others to love, even if it required you to betray your own truth. The mask of acceptance begins forming early. You learn to notice what others expect from you, and without even noticing it happen, you reshape your tone, adjust your emotions, and soften your edges to fit the mold. You hide your intensity because it overwhelms. You mute your curiosity because it intimidates. You suppress your sadness because it discomforts. Piece by piece, you build a version of yourself that protects you from rejection, but distances you from your essence. This mask becomes so familiar that you eventually mistake it for your identity. You think you are being kind when you are being self-erasing. You think you are being accommodating when you are abandoning your boundaries. You think you are being humble when you are shrinking to avoid being seen. The mask becomes a second skin, and you defend it fiercely because it has become the self others expect and the self you've been rewarded for. But masks are heavy. They require constant monitoring. You must watch your words, manage perceptions, anticipate reactions. You perform instead of express. You adjust instead of exist. The cost is subtle yet profound. You lose access to your own truth. And the more you try to maintain acceptance from others, the further you drift from acceptance of yourself. As consciousness begins to unfold, you start noticing the cracks in the mask. It becomes harder to pretend. Your sincerity begins to leak through the polished surface. Your intuition whispers louder than before. Your body resists situations where your authenticity is compromised. You feel a growing discomfort when you play a role that no longer fits. These signs aren't weakness. They are invitations to return to yourself. The moment you begin to know yourself, the mask dissolves in slow, unmistakable ways. You grow tired of conversations that require you to be less. You feel drained in relationships that thrive on your compliance. You sense an internal pull toward truth, even when truth threatens the stability you created. You stop trying to blend into environments that don't respect your essence. The self you constructed for acceptance starts to fall away because it cannot coexist with awareness. This is not rebellion, it is alignment. You realize that any acceptance that requires you to hide yourself is not acceptance, it's dependency. Any love that demands your performance is not love, it's convenience. Any identity built on pleasing others will collapse the moment you recognize your inherent worth. When the mask falls, you see yourself clearly for the first time. And in that clarity, you understand that real acceptance cannot be found outside. It begins within, in the presence of your unfiltered truth. There comes a moment in your growth when the world's noise begins to lose its grip on you. Not because the world becomes quieter, but because you become clearer. Clarity changes the entire equation. When you finally begin to know yourself, not the version shaped by fear, not the persona built for approval, but the self that emerges from inner truth, the noise outside you starts to feel distant, almost irrelevant. It no longer penetrates your core. It no longer dictates your identity. It no longer determines your emotional weather. Self-knowledge acts like an anchor. It roots you so deeply in your own awareness that external opinions stop feeling like threats. Criticism touches you differently because you understand its origin. Misunderstanding no longer destabilizes you because you see the filters through which others perceive you. False assumptions lose their sting because you recognize that they are reflections of someone else's internal world, not your own. When you know yourself, you stop giving power to anything that tries to define you from the outside. You understand that perception is not truth. You understand that projection is not reality. You understand that someone's interpretation of you is shaped more by their wounds than by your actions. And with this understanding comes an inner peace that external noise cannot disrupt. This clarity also transforms the way you respond to conflict. Instead of defending your character, you observe the emotional patterns driving the situation. Instead of explaining your intentions, you recognize when someone is not capable of receiving them. Instead of rushing to fix misunderstandings, you accept that some misinterpretations exist to protect the other person's ego, not to reflect your identity. You begin to see how much energy you previously spent trying to be understood. You see how many conversations you engaged in out of insecurity, not connection. You remember the times you tried to explain your heart to people who never had the capacity to hear it. And with this awareness, something inside you softens. You realize that understanding is not owed, it is a privilege, and not everyone is ready for the depth your self-knowledge carries. Inner clarity frees you from the exhausting need to manage how others see you. You stop performing, you stop arguing, you stop defending. Your truth becomes steady, quiet, and unshakable. You learn to walk away from noise without guilt because you recognize that peace is not found in convincing others. It is found in knowing your own essence. This is the moment when you understand that noise only hurts when it echoes inside you. When you don't know yourself, every judgment feels like an attack. Every disagreement feels like a threat. Every criticism feels like a wound. But when you know yourself, the echo stops. The noise no longer finds a place to land. It passes through you like wind through an open field, unable to distort the truth you carry. Self-knowledge makes noise irrelevant because it gives you something noise can never touch: inner authority. And once you experience the stability of inner authority, the world loses its power to pull you out of alignment. There is a profound turning point in your inner evolution when you finally understand that other people's perceptions of you are not your responsibility. For most of your life, you felt compelled to correct misunderstandings, soften judgments, and rescue others from the stories they created about you. You believed that being misperceived was a threat to your identity. You feared that if someone held an inaccurate view of you, your worth was somehow at risk. But as self-knowledge deepens, something essential becomes clear. Perception belongs to the perceiver. You begin to see that people don't see you. They see the version of you filtered through their insecurities, their wounds, their fears, their history. They see you through the lens of their emotional capacity, not your actual character. And the more you try to adjust yourself to fit into someone's distorted lens, the more you step out of alignment with your own truth. In the past, whenever someone misunderstood you, you felt an immediate pull to explain. You wanted to fix their interpretation, not because it was true, but because it threatened the emotional identity you had constructed. You wanted to be the calm one, the kind one, the forgiving one, the stable one, the logical one. Defending yourself was a way of protecting the role you believed you needed to play, but self-awareness dissolves this pattern. It shows you the quiet truth. Trying to rescue someone from their perception of you means accepting responsibility for a story they wrote without your consent. As you grow, you understand that you cannot control the narrative someone chooses to hold. You cannot force clarity into a mind committed to misunderstanding. You cannot prove your heart to someone who prefers their version of you over the truth. And you cannot save a person from their own projections, because their projections are not reflections of you. They are reflections of their unaddressed shadows. This realization shifts the power back into your hands. You stop chasing explanations. You stop correcting illusions. You stop apologizing for emotions that were never yours. You recognize that the need to rescue others from their perceptions comes from a fear of losing approval, not from genuine self-expression. Awareness teaches you that the people who value truth will seek it. The ones who prefer their story will cling to it, and neither response determines your worth. When you stop rescuing others from their perception of you, you reclaim the emotional energy you once scattered across misunderstandings. You begin to live from an internal reference point instead of external opinion. You validate your intentions without needing anyone else to confirm them. Your presence becomes rooted. Your boundaries become firm. Your voice becomes calmer, not quieter. You no longer defend yourself because you no longer fear being misjudged. You understand that misjudgment is a reflection of someone's limitations, not a measure of your value. And once this truth settles in your consciousness, you stop trying to pull people out of the stories they use to protect themselves. You let them hold their narratives, and you hold your peace. This is the moment when you realize that the real power is not in proving your identity, but in living it. There comes a moment in your awakening when you realize how much of your life was spent fragmenting yourself into smaller, softer, quieter pieces, so others could feel comfortable. You made yourself agreeable so no one felt challenged. You made yourself gentle so no one felt confronted. You made yourself small so no one felt insecure. Without noticing it happen, you learned to adjust your volume, dilute your truth, mute your depth, and reshape your identity into something easier for others to digest. This fragmentation wasn't intentional. It was protective. You believed that being fully yourself was too much, too intense, too complicated. Somewhere along the way, you absorbed the message that authenticity threatens people, while palatability earns you love. So you trimmed your edges. You packaged your emotions. You hid the vastness of your inner world. You taught yourself to survive through self-minimization. But fragmentation comes with a cost. Every time you dimmed your voice, a part of you dimmed with it. Every time you softened your truth, a part of your integrity cracked. Every time you pretended not to feel something, the distance between who you were and who you presented to the world grew wider. Eventually, you became fluent in disappearing inside your own life. The world saw the version of you that required the least effort from them, not the version that required the most integrity from you. Self-knowledge disrupts this pattern. When you begin to truly know yourself, fragmentation becomes impossible. You can no longer cut your truth into pieces just to be tolerated. You can no longer shrink your presence just to fit into environments not designed for your depth. You can no longer silence your inner world just to maintain harmony. The more you awaken, the more the cost of fragmentation becomes unbearable. You start noticing the moments when you begin to split yourself. You hear your voice soften when you want to speak firmly. You feel your intuition rise when you are tempted to betray it. You sense the tension in your body when you are about to agree with something that contradicts your truth. These signals become alarms, pulling you back into alignment. Awareness makes it impossible to fragment because alignment becomes your new foundation. You realize that you were never meant to be small. You were never meant to fit into shrinking spaces. You were never meant to be a watered-down version of your own consciousness. Your truth was never designed to be negotiated. As you integrate all the parts you once hid, you become whole. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means coherence. Your thoughts, emotions, boundaries, and values begin to move in the same direction. You no longer slip into different personas depending on the room you enter. You no longer shrink your spirit to protect someone's insecurity. You no longer pretend to be less aware than you are. You stop participating in relationships where your depth is treated as a burden. And something remarkable happens. Instead of fearing that your authenticity will push people away, you begin to see that whoever leaves was only bonded to your fragmentation, not your wholeness. Whoever stays meets you in your fullness. Wholeness filters your world with precision. You no longer break yourself into palatable pieces because you finally understand that your existence was never meant to be digested. It was meant to be lived. There comes a point in your self-discovery where emotional neutrality becomes your greatest power, not because you stop feeling, but because you stop reacting. You no longer rise and fall with the moods, expectations, or judgments of others. You no longer twist yourself around someone else's chaos. You no longer feel compelled to prove, persuade, or perform. Your presence settles into a different frequency altogether, one that is steady, unshakable, and inwardly anchored. Neutrality is not indifference, it's clarity. It's the point where your nervous system no longer interprets someone else's words or behavior as a threat to your identity. You stop absorbing emotional tension that doesn't belong to you. You stop entering arguments you don't need to win. You stop defending truths that are already self-evident within you. When you know yourself deeply, the world loses its power to destabilize you. People notice this shift long before you announce it. You become harder to provoke because you no longer respond from insecurity. You become harder to manipulate because you no longer react to emotional bait. You become harder to read because you no longer broadcast your internal states to earn sympathy or approval. Your presence becomes calm in a way that unsettles those who rely on your emotional participation to maintain familiar dynamics. This neutrality is born from inner alignment. When your sense of self is no longer tied to how others perceive you, you stop engaging in the emotional choreography they expect. Their judgments lose weight. Their disapproval loses authority. Their assumptions lose influence. You see their reactions as reflections of their own inner worlds, not measurements of your worth. This separation gives you freedom, the freedom to remain centered even when others are spiraling. Neutrality also rewrites your relationships. Some people may interpret your calm as distance because they were accustomed to the version of you who was constantly explaining, apologizing, or managing their emotions. Others may experience your neutrality as rejection because they relied on your reactivity to validate their importance. But your lack of reaction is not absence, it is evolution. It is the moment you stop living from emotional reflex and start living from conscious choice. Your responses become deliberate. Your energy becomes intentional. Your words become fewer but truer. You choose silence when silence holds more integrity. You choose presence over performance. You choose understanding over defense. And with every choice, you reinforce the message that you no longer move from fear, you move from awareness. Neutrality is spiritual maturity expressed in real time. It is the shift from ego to essence. You are no longer trying to control how others see you because you no longer need their vision to confirm your existence. You live from your inner truth rather than outer pressure. You carry yourself with a grounded confidence that does not require volume, urgency, or argument. You stop fighting battles that are not yours. You stop stepping into roles that are not aligned. You stop defending a self that no longer needs protection. And something extraordinary happens. Peace becomes your natural state, not your temporary achievement. Your neutrality becomes a mirror that reveals the emotional instability in others. Your presence becomes a quiet force that resets the tone of any room you enter. Your life begins to feel lighter, clearer, and more aligned because you no longer spend your energy reacting. You direct it with consciousness. This is the freedom that comes when you know yourself so deeply that nothing external can pull you out of yourself anymore. There is a moment in your inner evolution when the search for justification finally dissolves. You stop trying to earn the right to exist. You stop seeking evidence that you are worthy of being here. You stop constructing identities to defend your place in the world. Instead, you begin to experience something far more profound and liberating. The realization that your existence requires no explanation at all. You exist because you exist, and that is enough. This understanding arrives quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. It emerges in the spaces between thoughts. It rises in the pause before you reply. It whispers from a place inside you that has always been steady, but was drowned out by years of performing, proving, and negotiating your worth. When you finally hear it, something in you softens, not out of weakness, but out of recognition. You begin to sense that your value is inherent, not conditional. You feel the weight of external expectations slipping off your shoulders. For the first time, you inhabit yourself fully without asking for permission. This realization changes the way you move through the world. You become less interested in convincing anyone of your intentions, your goodness, your intelligence, or your potential. You no longer rush to clarify misunderstandings or beg for someone to see the real you. You understand that anyone determined to misinterpret you is not seeking truth. They are seeking confirmation of the story they already believe. And you stop participating in that dance altogether. Knowing that your existence is self-validating also rearranges your relationships. You no longer tolerate environments that require your self-abandonment. You no longer fit into spaces where your worth must be negotiated. You no longer shrink to avoid making others uncomfortable. You no longer bargain with your own identity to maintain peace. Instead, you live in alignment with your inner truth, even if it costs you proximity to people who never learned how to love someone who is whole. There is a spiritual stillness that grows inside you, a calm knowing that does not need to be defended, a quiet strength that does not need to be seen, a sense of internal grounding that does not depend on approval, attention, or validation. You stop identifying with the fragile self who once believed their existence had to be justified. You stop clinging to external anchors. You stop seeking mirrors outside you to reflect your worth back to you. You realize that you are the source, not the echo. This realization also frees you from comparison. When you recognize your inherent worth, you no longer feel threatened by someone else's brilliance or beauty or success. You see others as expressions of consciousness, not competition. You celebrate them without diminishing yourself because you finally understand that existence is not a hierarchy. It is a spectrum of experience, and your place within it is uniquely yours. With this awareness, life becomes simpler, softer, clearer. You speak less, but mean more. You choose actions that align with your inner compass rather than external pressure. You stop reacting to provocation because your identity is no longer fragile. You move through the world with a quiet confidence that unsettles those who rely on noise, drama, and approval to feel significant. Your presence becomes a reminder that true power does not need to announce itself. It radiates from within. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this realization is that it cannot be taken from you. Not by misunderstanding, not by rejection, not by judgment. Once you know you exist from essence, not performance, you are free. Free to be. Free to walk your path without apologizing for its direction. Free to embody the truth that your existence is justified by its very presence. You exist. That is enough. And you no longer defend what is already whole. There comes a point in your evolution where defending yourself stops making sense. Not because you have given up, and not because you no longer care, but because you finally understand something essential. Truth does not require protection. When you know who you are, the urge to explain, convince, justify, or correct begins to vanish. You recognize that self-defense is a symptom of self-doubt. And once self-doubt dissolves, the need to protect your identity dissolves with it. This transformation does not happen overnight. It begins subtly, within the quiet folds of your own awareness. You notice that certain accusations no longer sting like they used to. Misunderstandings no longer trigger the same urgency to fix others' perceptions. You start to see that the narratives people create about you are exactly that. Narratives. Not truths. Not reflections of your essence. Just projections shaped by their fears, filters, wounds, and expectations. And for the first time, you feel the freedom of not having to carry anyone else's interpretation of you. When you know yourself, you stop chasing clarity in places where confusion is a choice. You stop trying to prove your intentions to people who benefit from misreading them. You stop trying to make yourself visible to those committed to seeing you through the haze of their own unresolved stories. Self-knowledge silences the impulse to perform for misunderstanding. You simply stand in your truth, calm, rooted, unshaken, while others decide what story they need to tell themselves. Their interpretation becomes their business, not your burden. This shift also redefines your emotional landscape. Instead of reacting, you begin observing. Instead of defending, you begin discerning. You respond from presence rather than panic. You speak only when clarity is needed, not when insecurity is demanding attention. You realize that silence is not weakness. It is a sign that you no longer seek validation from those who cannot grant it. Your energy stops leaking into arguments you once would have felt obligated to win. Knowing yourself also exposes the emotional dynamics you once mistook for connection. You notice how often people tried to define you based on who they needed you to be, not who you actually were. You see how self-defense was woven into relationships where authenticity was unsafe. You recognize the cost of being misunderstood and the freedom of no longer negotiating your identity with anyone. This clarity doesn't make you arrogant, it makes you liberated. You no longer defend because nothing inside you feels threatened. This internal shift also disrupts old patterns of self-betrayal. You stop apologizing for your boundaries. You stop softening your truth to avoid discomfort. You stop shrinking your voice to maintain harmony. You stop sacrificing your emotional integrity for approval. When you know yourself, you no longer abandon your own clarity to protect someone else's illusion. You stop defending who you are because you finally inhabit your identity without conflict. And perhaps the most profound change is the peace that follows. When the need to defend falls away, space opens. Mental space, emotional space, spiritual space. You start to experience life from a grounded center rather than a reactive surface. You move through the world with an ease that cannot be performed, only lived. You become unshakable, not because you are rigid, but because you are rooted. The truth is simple. The moment you truly know yourself, defense becomes unnecessary. You realize that your existence does not need to be justified, negotiated, or explained. It is complete in itself, whole, sovereign. And the more deeply you embody that truth, the more your life begins to reflect it. There comes a moment in your evolution when the urge to explain yourself dissolves without warning. You don't fight against it. You don't celebrate it. You simply notice that something inside you has stopped needing permission to exist. It's a quiet shift, almost invisible from the outside, but it rearranges the entire landscape of your inner world. You realize that everything you defended was rooted in an old identity, struggling to justify its own presence. And now, standing in the clarity of self-knowledge, you see that there is nothing left to justify. You begin to understand that most of the battles you fought were not about protecting who you were, but about protecting who you thought you had to be. You defended the version of yourself shaped by expectations, guilt, and borrowed definitions. You argued to maintain illusions you no longer believed in. You kept trying to correct the stories people created about you, believing that truth required their agreement. But the more you explored your own consciousness, the more you realized that your existence does not depend on anyone's understanding of it. Awareness brings a kind of stillness that transforms the way you move through the world. You no longer rush to clarify what someone misunderstood. You no longer shrink when someone disapproves. You no longer negotiate your worth in the hope of being accepted. Instead, you stand rooted in the simple fact of being. You recognize that misunderstanding is not a threat, but a reflection of someone else's limited lens. You see that disagreement is not rejection, but an expression of their inner landscape. And you stop internalizing what was never about you. Knowing yourself removes the desperation to be seen. You no longer beg for recognition because you no longer feel unseen. You no longer crave validation because you finally validate your own experience. You no longer chase belonging because you belong to yourself. The silence inside you becomes stronger than the noise outside you, and that silence becomes a form of freedom you didn't know was possible. This is the moment consciousness reveals its deepest truth. You are not here to be decoded, translated, approved, or verified. You are here to live in alignment with the truth that rises from within you. Your purpose is not to convince others of your worth. Your purpose is to embody it. You free yourself from the compulsion to defend your existence because you finally understand that existence requires no defense. When you reach this state, life becomes lighter, relationships become clearer, boundaries become natural, and the world responds to you differently, not because you became louder, but because you became authentic. This authenticity radiates in a way explanation never could. You stop performing and start living. You stop arguing and start becoming. You stop defending and start being. You are no longer here to be understood. You are here to be yourself. There is a moment in every awakening when the need to defend who you are simply disappears. Not because you became indifferent, but because you finally became whole. If this message met you at that exact point in your journey, share with me the moment you first felt that shift. Tell me when you noticed that your existence no longer required explanation. Tell me when self-knowledge became stronger than the urge to be understood. Your reflection may be the reminder someone else has been waiting for. If you want any refinement, deeper tone, a more poetic or more psychological version, just tell me.